Hi, good morning. Great to have you on the show. Help us understand, how are you reading into the Auto PLI scheme and how does it really benefit you at Maruti? Also, there are several other fuel options for cleaner energy. Do you think that it's a little bit too early to get into incentivizing EVs and hydrogen cells rather than the other options under the ICE?
Yeah, good morning and thank you for having me today. Regarding the PLI scheme, I think it's quite clear the direction is towards the new technology, towards cleaner technologies. And the government has allocated a substantial amount, I think about 25 or 26,000 crores for this. For vehicle and the outlines of the policy, as you know, for OEM manufacturers, it is basically for hydrogen powered and electric vehicles. And on the component side, it is for a list of components, largely in the more forward-looking and cleaner technologies. So I think the direction is quite clear. The government wants to support, and rightly so, the future technologies. By the way, these technologies, the modern auto technologies, currently in an automobile is roughly 18%. It's expected by 2030, they would form almost 35% of the automobile. In India, it's just about 3%. So I think this will create a good supply chain, a modern value chain in the entire supply chain for the Indian auto industry.
Absolutely. The other aspect is also the import-export scenario, Shashank. While we're still not dependent on domestic imports, on the other hand, exports have not quite been, incentivized. Wanted to understand how you think the scheme is going to actually push local manufacturing.
Yeah, so as I said, for these components and expected in the future also, we have a large import content for the areas which have been outlined yesterday in the PLI scheme. So I think there would be an import substitution going forward, and also it's much cleaner. So from the environment perspective, also it's quite good. And more importantly, I think the government is wanting to set up a ecosystem for pushing localization and domestic manufacturing in these areas. And as I said, these areas in automobile will be roughly about 30-35% of the total automotive value chain going forward, expected in 2030. So it's a mix, of course, and of course, people might argue that what is the benefit? Yes, the benefit is it does bring down the cost of production for these areas, and also, therefore, the risk which is there for investing in these technologies. So I think that has been the focus of the government. And going forward, I think when we look at the actual contours and the details of the policy, we can probably form a much more crystallized opinion on this.
Mr. Srivastava, good morning. This is Alex joining in as well. I do want to understand on the electric vehicle space, because when I look back at the comments that have been made, not just in the past year, but going back into the Auto Expo, if I'm not mistaken, about 3 or 4 years back, where the thrust was on electric, I think Maruti, if I'm not mistaken, was of the opinion that it's too early to go whole hog. Do we see a change in that outlook based on the update in terms of the incentives that the government is providing? Do you bring forward some of the plans that you had? If I'm not mistaken, 2025 is when you were looking at a major thrust into EVs.
So yes, you are right that in the past we have said that the road towards EVs is through electrification. Which means also the usage of hybrid and of alternate fuels like CNG. That's true. Remember that the adoption of this technology, on a larger scale, large enough to make a business case for it, and also large enough for it to make an environmental case difference. We have always maintained that while EV is the future, It is not a question of whether, but it is a question of when. And that when it has been changing over the periods, not only in India, but across the world. So it all depends on some other constraints also, which are currently inhibiting the progress of EV adoption, not only in our country, but across the world, which includes the battery cost, technology, the new battery availability, the range anxiety which consumers have, and also the charging infrastructure. Also coupled with it is the localization, and localization can happen only when there are large volumes, and large volumes can happen only when you have the cost of acquisition down, and that can happen only when there is localization. So it's like so I think this policy does try to break this cycle of localization happening only when there is volume, and volume happening only when cost of acquisition coming down, and cost of acquisition happening going down only when localization happens. So in that sense, yes, this would accelerate for the industry, take a fresh look. But as I said, we need to get into the details, because the adoption of and the introduction of any new technology, especially EVs, is dependent not just on the cost of production, but also on such support as we saw yesterday in PLI announcement, but also on many other factors. So we will have to examine that and see what difference it makes, what impact it has on our overall plans going forward.
All right. So there's not a very clear direction that you're able to give me as far as your own plans are concerned on EV. But having said that, I do want to come to the here and now, Mr. Srivastava. A lot has been said about the semiconductor crisis. A lot has been said about the impact on production, but where do we stand just ahead of the festive season? What is the inventory level looking like? And specifically on your best-selling models, where do you stand right now? Is there an improvement at all that you're seeing on the production side?
As we had informed at the beginning of the month in the stock exchange that the production of ours will be impacted because of semiconductor shortage. The shortage, of course, continues at the moment. It's a little dynamic situation, and therefore to quantify exactly what would be the impact in October or in September, or exactly the impact in September, may be difficult to tell here. But we are monitoring the situation very closely, and you are very right. Normally what happens is when there is a festive period, just before that, in the Hindu calendar, there is a period called Pitra Paksha, or it's a very inauspicious period. Generally, in those times, manufacturers do a large wholesale of vehicles and build up stocks, so that when the expected spike comes during the Navratras or the start of the festive period, they have enough stock for satisfying the demand. But at the moment, the stock levels are low. So it is true that the production of which has been impacted has impacted the overall availability of the vehicle. And currently, I think our stock levels are roughly about 15 days or so. And towards the beginning of October, that is the crucial part of how much stocks we have for the festive season. So we have to see how much improvement we can have going forward from here, and then make our preparations for the festive season accordingly.
Hi, Mr. Srivastava. This is Mubina as well joining in. This time around, from what we've been hearing, considering the fact that people as well have a good amount of disposable incomes at their hands, and cross our fingers, there's no third wave or any such disruption. This will be a normal Diwali after, well, almost 2 to 3 odd years, because even prior to that, we had many other disruptions. So one thing is for certain, that demand seems to be very strong. I mean, SUV sales have been going through the roof. How would you try to, you said we'll have to see. So, what's the plan really then to try and cater to all that demand? Because you don't want a situation where you lose out on sales because the waiting period is too long. Anyway, an automobile is an item that sometimes customers do tend to think that, okay, let's put it off, for a little while. It doesn't take very long sometimes for customers to change their mind. So it's important that you catch them, at that right point of time. So what's the plan then to ensure that you don't lose out on any of that potential sales during such a crucial period?
Yeah, so in fact, it's a very good observation. But I only differ on one point. Is a large majority of, not large majority, maybe about 50% of the vehicle sales which happen are first-time buyers, where the prime requirement is mobility. And I think that mobility has the demand for that mobility has gone up post-COVID, probably because people are moving away from shared mobility and public transport. And that has been a great push for the first time buyers. So they, it's possible, of course, to postpone the purchase. You're right, very right. But car buying is a very involved purchase because it's probably the second largest purchase you make during your lifetime. At the same time, it's also a discretionary purchase, especially for the additional car buyer and the replacement buyer. So I think in balance, the only way where we can, the only strategy which we can have is to have as much production as is possible, and that is why we have been discussing all this while. Yes, so I was saying before I lost this connection, I was saying that obviously our focus is to make as much vehicles available as possible. And one of the things which we have done is to try to schedule our dispatches according to the geography. Remember, the festival season actually is different at different geographies of the country. It starts with Kerala in August. Then you had the Ganesh Chaturthi till 10th of September in the West region. And in the first half of October, a large push is there in eastern parts during the puja festivities. And then towards the later half, towards Diwali, Dhanteras in central North India. So we will try to maximize availability according to these expected spikes in demand in different geographies. And that's the best we can have at the moment. And of course, ultimately, we will need to produce vehicles to be able to satisfy the demand, which seems to be coming back quite strongly.
Shashank, I have to ask you this. A fourth price hike in this calendar year itself, the big devil, that is the commodity price uptake. Do you sense that commodity pressure is here to stay? And in light of that, would we see more such price hikes from Maruti?
Yeah, so allow me to quickly explain why these three hikes have happened. We have seen a very big increase in commodity prices, and I've been talking about it in the past as well. It's starting from April of last year. Whether you look at steel, where it went up from about 38 rupees a kg to almost 68, 70 rupees a kg. Copper from $5,000 come to $10,200. Then you have these precious metals, which are the rhodium or palladium. They have really gone up from about 18,000 rupees, I think, rhodium to about 64,000 rupees. So the commodity prices have actually led to a large increase in material prices. And material costs, by the way, for an OEM, an average OEM, would be about 75% of the total cost. So it has a big impact. This impact started coming in last year itself, but we did not make the price hike because we as market leaders, we thought that we have the responsibility not to compromise on the demand which seemed to be coming back, and that is why we postponed the price hikes. For us, it's anyway a last resort, and we always started expecting that it will soften going forward, and that's why we had a small hike in January, about 1.4 or 1.4%, 1.6% in April, again hoping that the commodities will soften, and then about a 1.9% last beginning of this month. So our thing is that we were always expecting commodities might soften, probably being optimistic, and we don't want to pass on this burden to the consumer. But they did not. They actually hardened, especially till September. Going forward, of course, we keep watching. We haven't passed on the entire cost increase yet to the consumers, and I think we are very mindful of the demand revival, which seems to be happening now, and therefore we don't want to compromise on that. While we keep watching, it is expected, though, that in the next 2 quarters there would be some softening of commodity prices. So the pressure might be less, but it's not gone away. So we keep a very close watch. And we have, in any case, to walk that very fine line between at the top line and the bottom line. So we can't really compromise, or we cannot just look at the top line and not look at the bottom line, or simply look at the bottom line and not look at the top line. Either thing is not possible. So it's a very fine line that we are walking. And I think, though, the consensus seems to be that there would be some softening in the commodity prices Q3 and Q4 of this fiscal.
Mr. Srivastava, always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for joining in and for speaking about the range of issues that you just did. Wish you all the best for the upcoming festive season as well.